back again with another episode of Miskatonic Alumni Association. I am Bill, and forever chained to my side is Terry. How you doing tonight, Terry?
In a good mood, Paul. We've come to the end of our long, arduous journey, as I'm sure you can concur with, right?
Yeah, it's a relief. It's a relief.
Yeah,
I
very
can
much
say
so.
I can say right now I'm glad it's a 10 episode long series. That's that's the thing I'm celebrating here.
I feel like we've become one of those podcasts or YouTube series, like where you're just doing this like rewatch of a famous show, except we missed the memo and just chose the total wrong
Yeah.
show.
Yeah, well, we're not going to make that mistake again, I can tell you that. If there's a Lovecraft
Oh
Country
man.
season 2, you'll have to tune into other diligent YouTubers and podcasters to get your discussions of it because I think we're finished here.
Yeah, I think we'll give it a good go in this last episode.
Yeah,
I'll try and be positive. I'll try and give some good thoughts and, end off on a good note rather than be depressing or
I know.
drive people insane as the best Lovecraft stories do.
I'll just say this one thing about right now is I know a lot of people like the series, and I think there's a lot to like about the series. I just think the problem for me is that for what I prefer in my style of horror, this is not horror at all. And for what I prefer in my style of adventure, this is not really my style of adventure. And what exasperated the fact is the title Lovecraft Country because I am really into Lovecraft. And this is not Lovecraft at all, as we've discussed time and time again. So I came at it from a wrong angle, and it's not really directed towards me anyhow. It's not the type of adventure and or horror story that I get behind. It's not my style. So I think I was doomed to be disappointed from the get-go. I just didn't realize it until I was in too deep.
I think I was actually trying to think before today, like, why did he choose the title like Lovecraft Country? Like, maybe it makes more sense in terms of the book. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's what I was thinking.
Um, but coming at the end of the show now and looking back at it, and I'm like, we've had the briefest of like dalliances with like Cthulhu in that first episode, and a flash of a Lovecraft book, and like fake Arkham or Arkham as they call it,
Hmm.
and like our little proto Shoggoths or whatever they were. And other than that, like none of that has been particularly important to the story. It's just been like little brief things of like, hey, Lovecraft.
Yeah.
You see it wink, and then they move on. So I think pretty much the same as you. Like I've also come at it from a direction that I suppose it's not intended for people like us, really. Which is why we do tend to be down on it. And I mean, that's not to say it's like a bad show necessarily, but it's not a show that I'm particularly fond of or that I will actually remember once we're done with today's episode. It will just fade away into nothingness, and that's probably the best thing you can do with it after having watched it.
I think so. Well, Terry, why don't you take us out right now? Where does this episode pick up? What are we getting ourselves into?
Well, I know like last week they headed through to that observatory, and Hippolyta was like jacking herself into the system, and they had that whole Tulsa like scene where they get this book of names that they need to save Diana, who was cursed by this police chief, etc., etc. Just another day in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it
Chicago,
pretty
which
much
is mystically connected to every single city in the United States within a 5 minute walk.
exactly as we see in this episode again, where
Yeah.
they seem to have walked to quite a distance. So I think then like it picks right up where it left off last week,
Yeah.
with them rushing back there with Diana and then trying to do this spell to lift the curse, right?
Yeah.
And that's how we're brought into it. I think like one little positive thing I'll start on is I really like the opening title card designs
Mm.
every week.
Yeah, yeah.
That's always been nice, right?
They do have a nice aesthetic for how they do their title cards. I do like that. And I said there's a lot to like about the show. I will one up you and do my own positive comment for this. At the very beginning, the recap that they have here, like building up into the episode to show like this is the final episode and it's recapping everything going on. I thought that was an exciting recap. And if I was watching that alone, if I missed the previous 9 episodes and I just saw that recap, I would have come into this final episode thinking, wow, this series looks really exciting. Because when you cut the fluff and the meandering from the previous episodes and you just focus on those key points, those key plot points that are just driving the story towards its conclusion, it looks really exciting. And I was far more impressed by the condensed recap than I was of experiencing the past 9 episodes. So I think that recap shows that the core of the story is good. The core of the story is entertaining. There is something thrilling there. I just think the polish was lacking in this presentation. I think they tried to do a lot more, but that recap really, I don't know why, it got me very pumped going into the episode. Like, yeah, I remember all that. Yeah, it's building up. This is going to be something good. And then the episode started.
I think, sadly for me, like that wasn't even included with my
Oh,
preamble to this episode. So
I'm
like I'm
sorry to
just like
hear that.
thrown right in the deep end, going like, oh, just another hour to get through.
Oh, I'm sorry
Um,
about that. Yeah.
so I think like this is the point like where we sort of see that Atticus has to sacrifice himself. I
Yeah.
know that's been said the whole time, but it's pretty much a given that he has to die
Yeah.
in the episode. And I know like they would talk. They had that whole section while they were doing the spell. Him and Letty like sort of fell unconscious at the floor
Mm.
and were in this sort of other dimension or whatever
Yeah, some
you could
pocket
refer to it
thing. Yeah.
as. Yeah, but I sort of just got a bit lost in that because I wasn't like I don't know if I was just zoning out at some point here, but I sort of was trying to figure out why they're trying to do the spell at the autumnal equinox again. And I remember Christina's trying to become invincible,
Mm.
and so she wants to now do this thing on this equinox, and Atticus will die. But then I was like, why? What are they trying to do again? Are they trying to bind her? What does that mean exactly? Like, I don't feel like it was ever really stated, but
No,
it could be something I've just missed, right?
no, I don't think it's really clearly put out there, but the gist of it I got was they were going to use her magic against her, basically making it backfire. So
Mm.
I don't think we're supposed to worry about the details on here because the writers clearly aren't. A lot of this is just done for convenience, and we've seen this in previous episodes. It's like you have to do this because reasons. And in a lot of stories, that works out. It fits with the thing. Well, that's just how it is. But with so many plot holes that we have in this series, things like that I can't really overlook because there's just so much more of the writing in all the previous episodes that isn't logical. It doesn't make sense. It makes huge leaps of logic. So in this instance, where it could be something like, oh, it's a counterspell of sort, yeah, I get that. But again, it's just another unexplained, half-baked idea that we're just supposed to go along with. So it is what it is.
I think that's a really good way of saying it. A half-baked idea that just doesn't seem to stick at any point, that we must just go along with. I feel like a lot of episodes are falling in that trap of like, having to come up with some mechanism to drag the story forward, and then they don't really put much thought or effort into it, and we're just led from, episode to episode going like, okay, I don't actually understand why are they going through all this. What is their end game plan here? So like pretty much that whole first section, I was just not really too invested in. Like the one thing I liked was where Atticus gets to sort of spend time with his mother,
Yeah.
and she tells him that like, look, Montrose and Uncle George, like he has the best parts of both of
Yeah,
them. That was a nice
I
little
like
thing,
that
you know,
too.
like
Yeah.
a nice little, yeah, that was a good way of putting it. And then, to cut a long story short, they eventually do successfully do this spell, and like Diane comes back, and but then I did notice like, oh, her arms like still looks like a little tiny Groot arm or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I did sort of, and I was like wondering, oh, I wonder why they did that. And then afterwards I realized she's like left-handed, so she can't do all those beautiful comics and
Yeah.
drawing and writing, um, which gave her like a lot of angst in this episode. So that was a nice little thing.
Mm,
Um, and then I know, like, as well, at that point, like, Montrose is like really worried about Atticus dying.
yeah.
And Atticus actually lies to him and says, like, oh, yeah, no, there is a way he can do this without dying. Like, he knows he's going to die,
Yeah.
obviously. Um, you can see the Letty's reaction at that point. She's like, yeah, she understands he's going to die as well. And then this was the part where they walked to Boston, if I remember
Yeah.
right.
They walk back to Massachusetts again. So when they went down in that underwater elevator again, I that's when I started saying, okay, then this is probably like magically connected, even though they make no mention of it being so. Uh, which again, I think it's one of those things you're just supposed to accept it, even though there's no logical point for it. And you would think with how these kind of plot points have come up in earlier episodes, somebody would have mentioned like, how the hell we get all the way back to Chicago when we were just in Boston? But instead they're just
Mm.
like, yeah, we'll just take the elevator back down to Massachusetts. Like, huh? No. But it's like,
Well, what were the things in the cellar? Like when they walked down in the cellar just before they left the Letty's house, and there was like stuff under this like wooden floorboard, and like
oh,
something knocking there.
what I figured that was is Atticus's pet Shoggoth that's protecting him. I'm guessing that's where it was staying the whole time, and I'm going to rant on the Shoggoth in a little bit, unless you want me to do it now. But yeah, when they went down there, and I heard that roaring and the thing banging on the little, I don't know what the hatch is down there. Is that the secret sub basement? Is that what it was from the earlier episode? I mean
Oh, it could be. Oh, I can't
whatever it is,
remember.
the fact that they just like regarded it as like, oh, there's a pet down there sort of reaction is like, oh, that answers my question from last week or 2 weeks ago when like, where is his pet Shoggoth? Well,
Mm.
I'm pretty sure that's what it was, and damn it, I'm going to whine about that later too. I know we're trying to be positive, but yeah.
I know this is also the point where they got some out of place music yet again.
Oh god, that
Um,
it's every week when I look at my notebook. When I look at my notebook every week, there's always a single note every week that says music still sucks, and it's still here. Yep.
a good way of putting it. Like, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, yeah. At that point, so they perform this spell there in that sort of underground, like, um, space beneath the museum, I'm assuming,
Yeah.
and they sort of uh, bring. I think that Aunt Abigail. Or am I just now getting confused again with the names? But
I,
they
I I
bring
don't remember the name. Yeah.
so they bring her, they bring his mother, and they bring old oh God, what's the main guy's name? The old guy there,
The
the old white guy.
Titus
Titus, sorry, I keep
Titus
thinking
Braithwaite.
Tiberius. So and they've got to like get a piece of him, so they're like having this huge fight with him. And I just remember like when he sort of magically teleports out of there, conveniently, it's right in front of Christina and Ruby's car.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, well, that's a little stroke of luck. Now Christina must know they're up to something.
Oh yeah, right
And
in front of her car. And can I interrupt you just to say
mm,
this? And the fact they're driving down a residential neighborhood in the 1950s, but for some reason, when they swerve, they're going at a speed that is so intense that Christina is catapulted through the windshield as if they're doing 90 miles per hour down the highway. It's like I with how slow the speeds are now in the 1950s and how casually they were driving, I really don't think she was going to be launched like that. But it's more drama. It's more making things look crazier than they are.
So I know, like, surprisingly enough for me, I suppose, well, it's an HBO show, so they actually used the N word, or
Yep.
Titus, like, said that. That was a bit of a shocker. I don't know whether they were supposed to say, "Hey, this guy is a really old racist white guy," but
Yeah.
I think we'd known that beforehand. So I mean, I was surprised. He seemed pretty cool with avoiding their binding spell really easily until they
Yeah.
eventually like overpowered him, and I'm assuming cut off a piece of his flesh from his chest.
Yeah.
And
That was
they all
odd.
vanished, and that was the end of that, right? I
Yeah.
think at that point, like I was like sort of trying to predict that. I thought Montrose might actually go and sacrifice himself at the end of the episode, or at least try to prevent Tick from dying. At least that was at that point in the show. I was like, oh, that's going to happen, right? And then I remember this is also when Letty lost that invulnerability.
Mm.
Like Christina like took it back.
Yeah.
Um, and I know this is also when we started seeing like signs of change because they came back to Letty's house and there's now they've actually got like some black neighbors now also just buying houses there. So I don't know whether that was like just trying to give some sort of background in how, things are changing there.
I have no
Um,
idea.
oh yeah, and then I remember this is like sort of when old Tick goes and visits his good friend Gia, who, as we've been asking the last 2 or so weeks, is like, where is she? What happened to her? And she's still staying in a hotel there. I have no idea how he knows that because we were just the last time we saw her, she was at that table with Letty, and then poof, gone.
I
Um,
think this is a show that when it comes to the plot and it comes to what's going on behind the scenes or between the scenes, I should say, it's a show that constantly assures us it's none of our damn business. And it just keeps going on. And it's like, no, here it is. It's like, well, how did that happen? It's like, don't ask questions, just watch our show. Like,
mm,
okay, but why is this happening? It's like, why are you still questioning this? Watch the damn show. Like, okay, but does it make sense, sir? That's what I'm getting from it, and it's just frustrating to me, Terrence. I know
mm.
every week we start saying we're not going to try be negative anymore, but the more I think about these things, the more angrier it gets because I just think the writing is so sloppy. And I mean, you just going back a step again, where they go under the house in Chicago, they walk to that little chamber for the spell that they found instantly in Massachusetts way back when. They cast the spell, and Titus disappears back to Chicago. That's where he reappears so Christina and Ruby could see him because they're not in Massachusetts
Mhm.
yet. So I honestly have no idea. It's just all for convenience. It's all for the sake of convenience with no thought put into how to go from A to B to C. It's like we're at A, next stop J. It's like, well, how did we get all the way here? It's like, stop asking questions. Watch the show. Like,
Mm.
I it's frustrating to me, Terry, and I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm starting to lose my composure here.
I feel it's weird because on one hand like these 10 episodes like when they sort of skip over these plot points it feels like they're going like oh crap we've only got 10 episodes we can't like focus on these small things or else we're going to drag the show out too long, but at the same point I feel like the 10 episodes was too long for them to actually do anything of significance with as well. Like this main plot just felt like it was dragging on and on and
On and
on.
on.
Like, and then we'd go like for these little divergent episodes, and you'd go like, okay, but aren't they really concerned about the fact there's a secret society that can do magic and Tick is probably gonna die? No, no, no,
No.
no. Let's just take a break, go on a little holiday, do this and that. And that's why I feel like the writers of the show have as much an idea as we do of how to write a good show.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm slandering your ability as a screenwriter, but I know for myself, like this would be a show I'd be proud of if I wrote it, and that's coming from
Yeah.
someone who has no previous experience in screenwriting.
This
So
would definitely be a show that if I wrote it, I would be running excitedly into the living room to show mom what I did and just wait for her to pat me on the head and send me off
and
to
I
bed.
mean, like that whole Geo thing, I really feel like that was a wasted character because I remember we had feedback on one of the previous episodes where someone on the Historical Society's Facebook group had said like that whole episode that focused on her was not in the book, and I was like, oh,
Yeah, yeah.
cool, they're focusing on these characters and maybe fleshing her out, and they're going to use her to a useful degree in the show. And then she vanished, made that one appearance, vanished again, and like to cut a long story short, even in this episode, she's pretty much there to do what? I can't even remember, to be honest. Like, I think the only thing she does is at the end with
At
her
the very end, yeah.
foxtails.
Yeah, with
Other
her
than that, she's
nine
just singing a
foxtails.
song in Woody, right? And that's all.
Yeah. Now,
And
I want to bring up that scene, the road trip scene when they're singing there. How did you feel about that scene?
I felt like it was forced to make us like feel like, oh, okay, this is like the last group of them all being happy going to this battle, like, the climax of the series. But
Yeah.
it was just something, if
It
they'd
was
taken it, I wouldn't cared.
it was very heavy-handed. It was very force-fed. Exactly what you said. Like, just look how happy they are together, and this is their last moment. But we never really seen them happy together. We've never really seen them as a cohesive unit where this would be a nice return to form where, like, okay, they can enjoy this moment as a family together. We never really got that. And having Gia singing along to a song where, yeah, she's into a lot of movies and that from time, but does that mean she would know this song particularly? And even Montrose singing along at the end there, like, did he really open up that much? Like, he's getting spotty there. That whole thing is like too forced, I think. But I will say one thing. I was happy to hear that song because it's only the second time in media I've heard the song. The first time expertly used in the movie Clue, based on the board game Clue or Cluedo, depending on where you're from what, 30 years ago. One of the best comedies of all time. And as soon as I heard them singing that, like, I have to go watch Clue again because that's going to wash the taste of this out of my mouth. And oh, I highly recommend the film Clue if you have not seen it yet.
If I
Yeah.
remember right, Tim Curry was in that,
Tim
right?
Curry, yeah, Tim Curry's in it. It just all-star cast of comedians from the 80s and just so good. You could quote that movie forever. You could quote that movie forever. And it was nice to hear that song again because it brought back great memories of Clue while I was suffering through this.
Oh man, well, at least that's something we can take from it, right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to feel at this point. Oh yeah, yeah. Obviously, before this road trip happens, like just as they're leaving, Ruby runs there and says, "Oh yeah, I've got this blood, this vial of blood that I managed to somehow extract from Christina, because I know Lady had
How?
asked her." Yeah, and I'm like at
How?
that point, like, does nobody ask her like
How?
why or how? And I
Just
mean,
how?
at that point, like Ruby didn't seem really keen on her when she was talking to Lady.
Yeah.
When Lady asked her, like, look, we need you to get this. She's just like, oh no, man, you just want to be my sister when you need this stuff, etc., etc., etc. And then we sort of see her talking there to Christina, and it sort of cuts away from that. And
Yeah.
obviously there's reasons they're reading it like this as we get on later in the show. But at the same point, like I felt like, doesn't Lady seem to question like, why all of a sudden are you running here enthusiastically with a
Yeah.
vial of blood?
Yeah. Like, you would think you would question that instantly. You would question that instantly. Like, hey, I got a pickle jar full of blood here from Christina and she didn't notice. It's like that's a damn lot of blood to sneak away from someone without them
Yeah.
noticing. So that would have been like red flag number one. Like, how did you get the blood from her? I mean, this is a significant amount, lady. And I do like the fact, I do like the idea of the reveal that, okay, Christina killed Ruby. Ruby betrayed, and Christina is now metamorphosizing. How the hell would you say that? I've never had to use the word in that form. As Ruby. So I like that idea, but again, full of plot holes. And I don't want to go on rambling too much because I mean we're already closing in on the last 10 minutes of what we normally like to keep as a length for these episodes. So I don't want to go on too much, but yeah, I like the reveal. I like the idea of the reveal. But I just thought it was another completely shoddy way of doing it, like they do with most of their big plot points here. But
Yeah.
can we just jump close to the end? Jump close to the end because I don't want time to run out before I rant on the Shoggoth.
Okay, let me quickly do
Yeah.
a couple of thoughts before we get to the Shoggoths then. I was actually wondering where were all the villagers? Like we'd seen them in like the first,
Yeah.
and then on the first two episodes, I'm
Yeah.
like, oh hey, all the villagers, and they got pitchforks.
Yeah.
Montrose must have brought a heck of a lot of salt. That's all I can
Yeah,
say.
that's a lot of salt they had there, yeah.
Okay. There was that huge Avengers style fight scene with all the battles happening. Not that it was very great. Ruby slash Christina has some moves. Um, okay, I'll actually get to the other thing after the Shoggoth thing. I think before you start your Shoggoth one, the only question I had is why were they showing the Shoggoth fight near Diana? Like, and why were they fighting? Was the
Yeah.
one the pet and the other ones Christina ones? I don't know.
Yeah, the main one was the tick pet coming to the aid of Diana. But here's where my rant starts here. It starts at the scene anyhow. Why would you leave the little girl alone in a car?
Yes. Yes,
Why
Martin,
the
exactly.
hell would you leave her alone in the woods? In the woods that they know is full of monsters because it ate an entire police force in the very first episode. Why would you leave the little girl alone there and then just have her saved by the Deus Ex Machina of Tick's pet Shoggoth coming again all the way from Chicago on his own in a span of 5 minutes? Because, well, he is a supernatural creature. I suppose he could do that. I mean, if humans can do it, I would imagine a supernatural monster can do it too. But then the Shoggoths come and attack her. God, I'm still sad I'm calling them Shoggoths. And then he fights them off. But carrying this through until the very end scene, like the end scene with Diana. I mean, I know we're skipping the whole like climax here just for my rant, but
Mhm.
assuming, and I think the logic only points in this direction, assuming the Shoggoth is there protecting Tick because of the spell Montrose cast on him, why is the Shoggoth now Diana's pet? Why is it protecting her? And why is it only hanging out with her and not doing anything to save Tick?
How did it defeat like a huge number of other like Shoggoths, like just this one?
Plot armor.
And like I know like there at the end where it's like walking up the stairs, I'm like, I bet you it's gonna like sort of howl at the moon. And heaven help me, it howls at the moon.
And howl at the
Um,
moon. And then
yeah, I don't
Diana's
know.
arm. I have to go through with this. So is like season 2 going to be Adventures of Cyborg or Steampunk Diana? I think J.J. Abrams is calling us, saying like
Okay,
we're
sorry, I did
ranting
just
a bit
mute
too
there.
much.
It's the house phone tends to be like in this room and the other room.
We can
Yeah,
forgive you
no.
because of your unfortunate placement there, Terry. So
So if I magically mute myself every few seconds, you'll know why.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't know, the bionic arm, like a bit early in the show, like we sort of see Hippolyta take her to this room and we hear something, but we don't see it.
yeah.
We just see Diana's eyes go wide and we're like, oh. But and then I just know like our little moment of triumph at the end where she like squeezes our good friend Christina totally dead like that.
Yeah. And
Just like
just
smashes her.
make a little girl into a murderer. I mean, I know she's
Yeah.
killing a bad person, but this is a brutal murder. And I
Mm.
know Diana has been through a lot, but again, it's still a little girl, and you're making a little girl an actual murderer. A girl who hasn't shown any tendencies to be violent. She showed tendencies to protect herself, to defend her family. But then making
Mm.
her come in a lady who is dying, Christina, who is dying, she has no chance of escape. She's slowly dying, and then brutally just basically tearing her throat about, crushing it with that robotic hand, like digging her fingers into the neck and killing her. Um, just seems a bit off for the character.
Yeah, the only thinking I have about that is that if they do decide to do a second season, like this is the character it's going to focus on, Diana with a bionic arm and a pet
And a
Shoggoth,
pet Shoggoth.
righting the wrongs that have been done against her and her family.
It'll be a modern take
Oh,
on a boy and his blob. It'll be a girl and her Shoggoth.
what was the one thing that they performed that spell right at the end or something that they said, and they said it affected all white people, but I
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
sure what would happen. Like we're not shown anything. There's like no.
Again, it's just a thing that makes no sense. I was thinking, okay, they're doing the binding spell to make her magic backfire against her. They're going to take away her immunity and all that stuff. And then they just mentioned there that when Christina's trying to do her magic and it's gone, I don't know if they meant that literally they've removed the ability for all white people in the world to do magic, or if it was being more symbolic that they took the magic away from Christina, who's like the last of this line of this whatever Adam group it is, whatever those people are, and now they have the book. So the magic is going to be with them alone, and she was just phrasing
Mhm.
it that way. I couldn't tell you which it is, but I assume we would have to go at face value and say that they just removed the ability for white people to do magic.
Oh, what was the other thing? Like, how did Letty get that protection mark back again? I
I
thought that
don't
had been
know.
taken. I
I
wasn't.
don't know. I have no idea. And I was wondering the same thing. She's thrown out, she's killed, and it's like, ha ha! I got it back. It's like, how?
And then, like, she
How?
obviously goes and does her sprinting thing
Yeah,
again that I've mentioned before,
yeah.
where her main superpower in every episode is just running very fast
Running very fast.
somewhere.
I get it just
Um,
so it's so disjointed and nothing is explained. I'm so heartbroken.
yeah, I don't know. Like, okay, for me, the one nice thing towards the end, for at least for me to end off on a positive note, was that like this little letter that Ticket prepared
Yeah.
for Montrose, like ends with this quote from Alexander Dumas from the Count of Monte
Mm.
Cristo, and that was like a nice way to sort of tie the show into this little circle, as it's called, full circle.
Yeah.
With that book having played a major role like in early episodes and had a lot to do with his background as a character. So that was a nice point. Like I thought at least for Tika Montrose, there was a nice way to end things off
Yeah.
despite his death.
The letter was nice, and I'm glad they went through and allowed Tick to die and not pull off some crap of how he did figure out a way to circumvent it and he's going to be around. I'm glad like there was still consequence like you would expect in a situation like this. So props to them for that. I don't know if he'll be returning in the future series, but at least they stuck to their guns where it was dangerous, and Gia even
Mm.
witnessed his death at that point, so she knew he was going to die there, so even she couldn't save him. So I mean, it was good that they did that and they didn't take a crap way out, but so many other plot holes through it.
Yeah, I think from my side, that's probably all I actually thought of the show. I don't know if we want to give, or if we have already given our thoughts on the series as a whole, but I
Yeah,
know for me,
I was gonna ask you. I know originally when we were making these episodes, like way back when episode one was out, and we were kind of stoked for it, and we were liking the way it was going. We said, "Oh, okay, we'll do a discussion on each episode, and when it's done, we'll do one additional episode reviewing the season as a whole." I don't know if I want to do that. Do you?
Oh no, I don't think I could do another hour. As much as
Yeah,
I enjoy crapping on the show,
yeah,
like I think another hour of that is going to make very poor listening or
definitely.
viewing for our audience out there.
Definitely. Yeah, so I would say if there's anything you want to say about the series as a whole, now's the time to say it. I know we're going to go a little bit over time and we did last week too, so maybe if we wrap this up in the next 10 minutes, at least keep it within 45. Like let's do that. But
Well,
yeah.
I'll just give like a quick like little thing, a sentence or two. Yes, I'm not going to dwell on it too long
Yeah.
because I think it's fun in places. It's forgettable in the majority of
Yeah.
places. There are like good points in it. It's nice to have had like predominantly black-driven, supernatural tinge show with like hints of Lovecraft as little as they've been. So I appreciate that. I think has been extremely shoddy for the majority of the season. A lot of good characters have just been dropped by the wayside. Um, and I think that's par for the course with anything J.J. Abrams sticks his fingers in.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised. But if you enjoyed the show, good for you out there. Anyone who's watched it and enjoyed it, I'm glad you have. Like, I don't know whether I will ever bother picking the book up. I
Mm,
don't think so. Like, maybe it's well written, maybe it's not. But the show hasn't sold it to me at all.
same.
And that's about all I would like to actually say about it.
I want to say that I think your comments are pretty spot on. It's a lot of how I felt the whole way through. I think the first episode is probably the best. I think
Mm.
it had a really strong start. It had a really nice setup. It had Uncle George, who ended up being the best character of the entire series. And I still think that moment in the first episode, the slow car chase out of the county with the racist police on their
Yeah.
tail, that is still some of the most tense and unnerving moments of recent television history there. Like watching, like, what the hell is going on? Are they going to make it? Like, because you know that stuff is real. You know that stuff happened. And that was some of the scariest stuff in the entire series. And I really wish, I know like the civil rights and a lot of the just the terrible history plays a significant role in the series, but I wish they would focus more on moments like that that makes the reality visceral and uncomfortable and horrifying, which it is. That's the true horror in this series that I wish they would focus on. I think the use of Emmett Till and his murder and the use of the Tulsa massacre, I I think those were done poorly. I think they were just these are really huge moments in not even so much civil rights history, but in informing civil rights history
Hmm.
in the US and just terrible, terrible, terrible incidents, but their use of set dressing
Yeah.
instead of showcasing what is truly horrible about it. They don't seem to be given the same respect, and I didn't really give it as much thought until previous week when you mentioned Watchmen. HBO's Watchmen also started with the Tulsa massacre too, and I had not watched it, so I started watching Watchmen in the past week just to give it a shot. And like I mentioned to you before, night and day, night and day. The way the Tulsa massacre is shown to be brutal
Hmm.
in Watchmen, and how you see the impact stretch into the plot of the series and how it's affecting
Yeah.
things nearly 100 years later, simply because of just how devastating it was, is so well done. While in this series, it just seems to be a nice backdrop for the characters to get into action and showcase who they are, and you have Letty walk slowly through fireballs in her big hero moment. that it, those moments were squandered, wasted, and they feel almost uh, exploitative of those scenes.
Mhm.
Whereas a moment like in episode one, the slow car chase, is just beautifully done in how uncomfortably tense and terrifying it
Yeah.
is. And I wish if they were going to really focus on race as much as they have, they focus more on those kind of moments that show
Mhm.
the true terrifying nature of life back then.
No,
So
I couldn't say it better than that, boy. I totally agree. Now that you mention it, that whole sort of slow chase scene, like any form of tension like that, that was probably the last moment that in the series, for me at
yeah,
least, had that feeling of tension and
same.
dread almost to it, right?
Yeah,
Which is really sad. And then I felt like they touched on these sort of racial tension moments, like to a small degree. They also had a few other bits where they try to address it, but they just never really fully went in with it, you know. And it just turned out a whole villain of the show was this blonde-haired white woman,
mm,
and I feel like that's just a real cheap shot, you know.
yeah,
So that's really all I've got to say about that. Yeah.
yeah. Overall, just there's a lot for some people to like, and I know it has fans, and I fully understand why people would enjoy it. It's just not my particular brand of TV show. It's not something that I'm excited to look into again. It's not something I will watch again. It did have its moments, like you said. It did have a couple of really cool moments, like you said, but it just not my thing. And unequivocally not Lovecraftian, and I'm not going to stick with it if it continues.
Well, on a better note, I think that means now that we've come to the end of this 10 episode run, we can now finally move on to more Lovecraftian things, like which should actually be driving us forwards as fans of the mythos. So
Yeah.
hopefully, upcoming episodes will be far more rewarding for people to listen or watch to.
And far more positive, because hopefully there'll be things we want to talk about and not things we accidentally cornered ourselves into talking about.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think. We don't have anything set in stone for in terms of next week's episode, right?
No, we
But we'll
got a list
be.
of things we were planning on doing, just don't know which one is going to be next week.
Mhm. And I know with Halloween coming,
Mhm.
um, I know from my side, I'll try and do something on Halloween. I know you're busy for that day, so
Yeah.
I'll try and do something special at least. I don't know whether Lovecraft and Halloween are very much connected anywhere. I feel like it's more schlock horror stuff, you know, like Freddy and Jason and whatnot. But
Yeah.
maybe we can do at least, I can at least do something on that day. But hopefully everybody's enjoyed the 10 episodes of boring conversation about a boring show.
Yeah, well, I think it was appropriate level of boring for the source material we're working with. But yeah, from now on, from this point forward, we're going to be getting into stuff we actually want to talk about, stuff we want to show you. So if you even put up with this, I mean,
Mhm.
thank you for doing that. Leave a comment. What did you think about the series? What did you think about this episode? What do you think about two middle-aged white men complaining about it? I mean, just tell us what you think.
Mm.
Write your messages. Where can they find us, Terry?
Well, as usual, if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it on podcast, I mean, you can get hold of us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, obviously. Leave a voice message on Anchor FM where we host the podcast, YouTube comments. We're also to be found hanging around on Facebook in the Howard Philip Lovecraft Historical Society, who have always supported us in this endeavor, for which we thank them as usual. Um, and other than that, there was a Twitch channel that we're still going to get up, and numerous other ways to get hold of us. So whichever floats your boat, go for it, and we'll get back to you. We love conversation. We love being proven wrong if the show was the best instant sliced bread. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the next one.
And it's
Thanks as
very
well.
easy to prove us wrong too. So yeah, keep that
Yeah,
in
very
mind.
much
Yeah,
so. Very
very
much so.
easy.
But as always, thanks for sticking with the 10 episodes of Lovecraft Country, despite its ambivalent nature. I'm glad we got through it. It's been a good way to warm up for us to start recording. So apologies for me still being stuck in South Africa with ringing phones and leopards and lions running outside, devouring people in the street and whatnot. So hopefully things will improve over the coming months. But I
Any
definitely
luck?
look
Yeah.
forward to what the future holds. So thanks for the effort you've put in, Paul. I appreciate it as always, as our viewers do, despite my shrinking and growing stature within our episodes.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, anything you'd like to end off with then?
No, I just want to say again, thank you, Terry, and thanks for anyone who's been watching it. Thanks for putting up with it. And yeah, look forward to positive videos coming up in the near future. And yeah, we'll be seeing you soon.
Perfect. Cheers.